Capitalism. Sure, you've heard of it. It's a pretty big thing. Some of us even live in it, so why don't we talk about it? In this video, I'm going to be going over, first of all, a brief examination of the ethics of capitalism and some of the sort of moral issues that is often discussed when we analyze capitalism as a political system. An economic system, I guess, would make more sense. And then also going over two potential solutions, these being universal basic income versus worker-owned cooperatives. And before we go in that, yes, I am standing up now. That's a poster. I'm standing closer to it. I know it's pretty cool. Let's go straight in. So what is the main ethical issue that's spoken about when we discuss capitalism? So the main one people like to bring up is basically the idea of coercion. So a lot of people, if you're like me, care about things like freedom and free choice. These sort of things are very important philosophical concepts to a lot of people. And the idea is that a capitalist system without any sort of, let's say, no welfare state or anything like that is just the markets and businesses. There is an inherent sense of coercion. There's an inherent form of coercion. And this is simply, if you don't work, if you don't get a job, you're going to die. You're not going to be able to afford food or water or anything like that. So boom. In its most basic sense, there is an element of coercion in capitalism. So basically, the choice that you're given, which a lot of people would consider to be a choice. You say, oh, you chose to work here, you chose this job, isn't necessarily much of a choice, not much of a free choice, because this choice is unfortunately one of you do this or you die. And in the same way that someone has a gun to your head and tells you to do something, whatever, if you end up doing what they tell you to do, it's probably not a free choice because you were under the threat of coercion. The only difference is that in the capitalist system, it's less direct. It's not a person with a gun to your head. It's a system which, if you don't participate in, basically means you die. And so a lot of people tend to apply this to the idea of a meritocracy. So the dream of capitalism, or at least, I would say most people would consider in their capitalist society, the American dream would be a meritocracy where you work you work this hard. That's how far you're going to get. Anyone can succeed. There's nothing stopping you except your own hard work and your own labor. And one of the problems with the idea of a pure meritocracy that people often want is that you're always going to need certain jobs to be done. Things like service workers, things like cleaners, these sort of low-paid jobs that people would often consider low-skilled as well. These are always going to need to be done, and a meritocracy in itself, it can't really exist purely because not everyone can work hard to get beyond this point. Not everyone can work so hard to stop being a janitor, for example, because the world's always going to need janitors. And unless you believe that every person, the people who are janitors or would be in this sense are there because they should be, and that they're not very smart and they never could be able to work better, you're kind of stuck. So we've got this element of coercion here, and we've got an issue with an ability to rise to the top. So you can say, not everyone can fight out of a situation that they're placed in. And you say this to people, and sometimes you'll get a simple, oh, no big deal, whatever. Of course you've got to work to something. So where do we go? The simple next step is basically you can apply this very strongly to slavery. So obviously slavery, when one would be owned and had to work there, you can simply ask the question, well, were slaves free in being slaves? And they'd say, no, of course not. You say, well, they could just kill themselves. They got a choice. They could just die. I'm sure all of them would have had access to some form of suicide, no matter what it be. They could just kill themselves. They had a choice. They could have not done this. So therefore, they're free. And people would say, well, that's obviously ridiculous. That's insane. What the hell? And it's pretty simple. Well, then, yeah, same as capitalism, just less direct. And the difference, I guess, you get to choose who you're a slave for. Slightly better, but not significantly. There's still this inherent coercion in both systems. Under slavery, you technically had a choice. You could kill yourself. In the Hobbesian sense, you would be free, because you can, shoot yourself and get out of it or whatever. However, I think for our purposes and for the purposes of actually improving people's freedoms, this is something that needs to be overcome. This is an ethical issue where there is a distinct lack of freedom for most people in society. And of course you would say, well, people can start a business and then they don't have to work for anyone. Once again, same thing, back to the meritocracy issue. Not everyone can start their own business. And if you were to start your own business and you employ people, you're just simply propagating these unethical situations of working for someone at the threat of death in an extended sense. So we're at this point here where we've basically got coercion as a heart of capitalism. So this is where a lot of people bring in the idea of universal basic income as a means to solve this ethical issue. Universal basic income is talked about quite a lot. I'm not going to go into the most details. It's just an amount of money given to every single person each month basically enough to just survive. If you want more details, just Google Andrew Yang and press play on anything that he has. He goes into more detail about numbers and things like that. However, for my purposes, I'm just going to be considering this as a philosophical principle of everyone just gets a certain amount of money every month, and it's just enough to live. Now, how could this overcome the ethical issue? Well, pretty simple. If you have a UBI, you can live without having to work. So you don't have to work because you can live a basic subsistence lifestyle without having to be subjugated to do a job in which if you get sacked, you're going to die. This sense of do this or die is now gone because you can just live. You can just live off the UBI. So ethical issue solved, and lots of people's lives dramatically improved. People lived out of poverty. Hooray, hooray, haha, yes, great. UBI solved all the world's problems. But does this actually solve our ethical issue? So earlier on I established, a choice made out of coercion of death is clearly not going to be a reasonable choice. It's not going to be one that one would consider to be made freely. If I have a gun to my head, blah, blah, blah. Is a choice made where the alternative is poverty or just a subsistence lifestyle, just a life of you have just enough for food, water, and you get shelter, basically. If that is the alternative, is there not still this element of coercion? Is poverty or a subsistence lifestyle still a coercive element? It's not the same as death, but it is still, I think most people would consider a pretty bad life. So people who support UBI would argue, well, we're just trying to keep people alive. You can survive as much as you want. However, if you want to engage in the luxuries and the rewards of such an amazing society of which we live, then you have to give back and you have to get a job in this sense. Whereas some other people would argue, well, no, there's better ways to work around this, and there is still this element of coercion. Is it really a fair choice if the option is, terrible, miserable life stuck in a basement somewhere, affording nothing but some food and some water, or have a miserable job where you're going to hate it and you're unhappy and you don't really get paid well and you get exploited? Still a coercion. This is an argument particularly seen by YouTuber Vaush, where he makes a point for worker-owned co-ops. Now, a worker-owned co-op is it's a little bit of a complicated concept, but in its most basic sense, it's just if you work somewhere, you own a percentage of that company. Everyone owns for the company. It can also be described as workplace democracy, or the democratization of the workplace, where workers can basically vote for everything. They vote for their managers, their leaders in this sense. They vote on profits and salaries and everything like that. And the idea of a worker-owned co-op is, right, we'll get rid of this coercion thing because we're going to give people more control over their lives. There isn't this coercion to go work for a boss who treats you like crap and hates you and you don't get paid properly and get exploited, because you would have control over what you do. You have this democracy element. So there isn't the coercion of work under an authoritarian system, where you're a wage slave, basically. Once again, bringing it back to the idea of slavery, you're a wage slave. Or you can bring in this system of a worker-owned co-op, in which case you have more control and freedoms over what people are doing for the vast majority of their lives, for your 9 to 5, for most of your day and most of your life. And that's why I think a lot of the time you can see a sort of almost a battle on the left or leftist circles of UBI versus a worker-owned co-op, because whilst a lot of people would grant this ethical issue in capitalism, there are different ways to sort of go about solving it. And really, I'm still not even sure which one I would prefer if I had to pick one. It is quite a difficult line to reach. UBI seems more, convincing. I feel like it'd be easier to sell UBI to people than it would be worker-owned co-ops. However, I can't get it out of my head the further ethical issue of, if I grant that death doesn't give you a fair choice if it's the alternative, can I really say that a subsistence, almost poverty-ridden life is the same thing? It kind of is. I can't really get over that. So yeah, I feel like this has been a pretty brief and overview of one of the major debates in leftist circles in solving the ethical issues of capitalism, and getting over the issues of coercion at the heart of the system that we currently have, and potentially providing two alternatives on how to get around this. We've got universal basic income, the simple, sleek, new age techie way to do this. Give everyone $1,000 a month, as Andrew Yang's plan was, and then boom, you can live your life independent of everyone else. You can just live. Ethical system, ethical issue cleaned up, all good. But then you can say, well, is it really still a choice if it's a terrible life on $1,000 a month? Isn't that much money? It's not really enough to be able to live a fulfilling life that one would want to. Surely the best way we can do this is actually improve people's working situations so they have more control over what they do, and then the choice isn't an authoritarian system or nothing. It's, okay, you can engage in a workplace democracy where you still have to work, but you have control over your means of production and everything that you do yourself, etc, etc. and you're not, subject to an authoritarian system of a boss and then a CEO who would fire you at the drop of a hat because, profits were down by 0.2%, make the line go up, that sort of stuff. So I would love to hear what anyone else would think about this, UBI or worker-owned co-ops. Do you think we could do both? I mean, I'd quite like that. I'm not complaining. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the new format as well. I'm standing up here. Hopefully there's going to be photos there sometimes. I'm not sure how much I edit. So yeah, capitalism, ethics of capitalism, UBI or worker-owned co-ops. Let me know what you think down below, or any of the others. Please like and subscribe if you like these videos. There's also a podcast. The True Future channel is on every single podcast app that is in existence. We recently had a podcast with Natalie Bennett, former Green Party leader, who's a massive UBI advocate. So if you want to hear more about how that could affect, especially environmental issues, check that out. The link will be in the description here, or you just click on the channel. And yeah, thanks for watching.